Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Dr. Dee and Certain Spirits by Manly P. Hall. An article taken from PRS Journal, Volume 19, Number 1, Summer 1959. Dr. Dee and Certain Spirits. In the year 1700, the Cottonian Library was donated to the British Museum by the grandson of Sir Robert Bruce Cotton. Among the curiosities in this collection was a sphere of smoky quartz about the size of a small orange. The actual substance of this magic sphere is cairn gorm, long regarded with superstitious reverence by the old magicians of Scotland. The encyclopedia describes this globe as a piece of solid pink-tinted glass. But George Kunz, an outstanding authority on precious stones and their uses in divination, declares definitely that it was smoky quartz and not an artificial production. Earlier writers refer to this crystal ball as the showstone of Dr. John Dee of Mortlake. Actually, this strange and learned man used several magical glasses and mirrors. In the collection of Horace Walpole, there was for a long time a polished slab resembling a small mirror made of obsidian, which originated among the soothsayers of ancient Mexico. Walpole wrote a label for the stone, stating that it had once belonged to the same Dr. Dee, and had been used by him to call forth familiar spirits. This Dr. Dee was in many ways a remarkable person, whose abilities and debilities have inspired poets and dramatists. It has been claimed, probably with some justification, that the majestic figure of Prospero in The Tempest was modeled, at least in part, from the personality of Dr. Dee. On the other hand, Butler, in his Hudibras, draws a vicious caricature of the sage of Mortlake. Some persons seem to be born to defend forlorn causes, to stand firmly against accepted beliefs and traditions. There was a side to Dr. Dee's temperament that could have elevated him to prominence and security, but there was also a strange perversity about his genius. In the presence of opportunity, he chose failure for a lot. And although many notable persons were among his acquaintances and he held the confidence of kings, princes and prelates, he lived in debt and died impoverished. Nor can it be said that he was deficient in appearance or ability. He was handsome and well-proportioned, and with advance of age was a venerable scholar with a luxurious beard, a tight black cap and flowing robes. He seems to have deported himself with appropriate gravity, and his only weakness, if it can be called such, was that learned kind of gullibility frequently noted among those devoted to intellectual pursuits. It is said that he was ill-treated by his enemies. His friends were no improvement. His sincerity was beyond question, for how can a man better demonstrate his integrity than by sacrificing his worldly station and his good name in defense of his convictions? Dr. John Dee. From the original picture in the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, John Dee was born July 13, 1527. He has been described as a gentleman by descent, and his family, though not distinguished, was of good Welsh stock. He grew up in the London of the Tudors. That is, in a disturbed and troublous environment. Political and religious discord marked the time, and there could have been little in the social scene to inspire confidence or an abiding faith. Intellectually speaking, the 16th century was burdened with countless superstitions. Witchcraft and sorcery, though gradually passing out of fashion, still occupied the public mind. Secret sciences were cultivated with high optimism, and practical alchemists were industriously questing for the elixir of life and the elusive powder which could transmute poverty into wealth. John Dee was the product and progeny of his time. He devoted himself to arts and sciences which were soon to fall into general disregard. He was not actually a superstitious man himself, but he had an openness of mind which forbade him to condemn ancient arts and sciences. Living in a period of rapid transition, he was viewed with suspicion by both conservatives and progressives. It is recorded that Dee received his earliest education from his devoted mother, and that the family estate made it certain that he would have such religious training as was generally available. Considering the prevailing temper, the quality of the spiritual heritage is open to speculation. Later, at the Chantry School of Chelmsford, young John received the elements of Latin grammar from Peter Wiley, a stout and honest priest, who later defended himself successfully against the king's commissioners. One writer suggests that our John was once an altar boy and developed an early devotion to religious mysticism. When he was 15, he was entered as a student at St. John's in Cambridge. He seems to have completed his trivium with honours, but there is some doubt about his higher studies, which were then included in the quadrivium. In any event, he was made a Fellow of Trinity and graduated from his own school with the degree of Bachelor of Arts. Later he returned to Cambridge, where he took his master's degree, but how he acquired a doctorate is uncertain. Perhaps he received this distinction at the University of Louvain, where he resided for some time and enjoyed a favorable reputation. His specialty was mathematics, and he taught it so dynamically that a vast congregation of persons assembled to hear his lectures. Those who could not get into the great hall at the college are reported to have climbed the outside walls to listen through the open windows. This in itself was remarkable, for Euclid did not normally command an enthusiastic hearing. We cannot pause in this brief outline to cover all of the interesting particulars of Dr. Dee's eventful career. In due course, we find him drawn to the court of London, where he was invited to cast the horoscope of the unfortunate Queen Mary. This incident precipitated Dee into a complex of situations that nearly proved fatal. Comparing the horoscope of Mary with that of the Princess Elizabeth, daughter of Henry VIII, by Anne Boleyn, he seems to have anticipated the ascending fortunes of Elizabeth. Suddenly, the accusation of black magic was hurled against Dee, together with the ever-effective charge of treason. When the Star Chamber found no trace of treason, religious friends were advanced and his enemies attempted to convict him of heresy. This ugly charge was unprovable, however, and after some period of imprisonment, Dee regained his liberty and was permitted to continue his astronomical and astrological practices, and in the years that followed was consulted by persons of distinction. After the death of Mary, Dee came to the favorable attention of the great Queen Elizabeth I. She selected him to choose, according to the stars, the best hour for her coronation. The brilliance of Elizabeth's reign seems to testify to his skill. As royal astrologer, official or unofficial, Dee received considerable assistance from the crown, but due to the extravagance of the court, the support of the Queen was erratic and not especially substantial. Dee established himself in the little village of Mortlake, in a house owned by his widowed mother. Here he built his library and constructed a practical laboratory. Here also he entertained the Queen and distinguished visitors from many lands. Dee married twice, and after the death of his first wife, was united in holy matrimony to Jane Froment, who mothered for him 8 children and was his beloved helpmate through the long years of his uncertain fortunes. Mistress Dee seems to have had a practical turn of mind. She encouraged her scholarly husband, who concerned himself with problems of navigation and the naval defense of the British Isles. In those days, astronomy and astrology included dialing, and sea captains were grateful for assistance in navigating the almost uncharted seas. Dee became profoundly concerned about national defense and wrote considerably on the importance of England's having an adequate navy to protect its shores and to extend its domain both in the Old and the New Worlds. If he did not actually bestow the impulse which later made England mistress of the oceans, he certainly possessed a vision later to be abundantly fulfilled. Thus it would seem that he was on his way to fame and fortune. His enemies were powerless against him, and he held royal favor as late as the time of James I. In the midst of these fortuitous happenings, the learned doctor began his fateful experiments of communicating with the dead. This is where his crystal ball began to influence his career. There has been a heated controversy over Dee's preoccupation with spiritualism. He had undoubtedly been aware of ancient magical practices, for even in the Bible, the Witch of Endor summoned the shade of Samuel upon command of Saul. There were many classical references to familiar spirits, and the cycle of Faustian literature was well remembered. It is evident that Dee himself developed some kind of psychic sensitivity. He experienced enough to be wholly convinced that beings from another world could communicate with the living. Furthermore, he became possessed with the idea that such communication could be profitable, and that from the other world knowledge could flow into the mortal sphere. Mistress Dee is on record as being unsympathetic. From the beginning, she seemed to sense the approach of trouble. She vainly sought to persuade her husband to discontinue his psychic experiments, but once the good man began to observe strange shadows in his showstone, nothing could quench his ardor. Edward Kelly. From a print prefix to Dr. Dee's Book of Spirits, London, 1659. In the early stage of these psychic experiments, a certain Mr. Edward Talbot, better known as Edward Kelly, appeared upon the scene. Once again, we must depend largely upon circumstantial evidence. This Kelly had lost his ears for forging or counterfeiting, but at the same time, he seems to have possessed considerable knowledge in chemistry and related fields. He must have been a man of some intelligence, or he could not have convinced Dee of his learned accomplishments. Mistress Dee formed a definite dislike for Kelly, and there ensued a psychological division in the household. Almost immediately upon Kelly's arrival, the psychic manifestations increased in number and interest. It is quite possible that regardless of the vicissitudes of fortune, Edward Kelly was a medium. Again, accounts are obscure as to Dr. Dee's part in these experiments. Did he merely record them? Did he accept Kelly's descriptions of spirits and the messages which they brought without question, or did he also share in these experiences? In his diary, Dr. Dee seems to imply that psychic occurrences took place in his presence. Nor were the motives behind these seances selfish or personal. Dee was convinced that his spirit visitors, including celestial beings, could assist and direct mankind in practical ways. The messages were, for the most part, constructive, though somewhat vague. Dee hoped that in the end, instructions would be given by which nations could be reconciled, society elevated, religion unified, and universal peace brought to realization. By nature virtuous himself, he desired only that which was good, and was perfectly prepared to endure ridicule and persecution if these would ultimately result in a better way of life for his fellow men. Out of the years dedicated to these strange pursuits, there came finally an extraordinary volume published in London in 1659. It is a massive folio extending beyond 500 pages. This work is burdened with the heavy title, A True and Faithful Relation of What Passed for Many Years Between Dr. John Dee, a mathematician of great fame in Queen Elizabeth and King James their reigns, and some spirits tending, had it succeeded, to a general alteration of most states and kingdoms in the world, the original copy written with Dr. Dee's own hand. It may not be entirely correct to say that this volume is the first formal work on spiritualism, but it can be pointed out as one of the earliest examples of a careful and impersonal recording of a series of seances. It appears that not a single word was left out, and all the attendant details were exactly set down. This book is certainly one of the ancient landmarks of psychic research, and its essential content does not differ greatly from more recent productions. Various spirits are described together with the questions asked of them and the answers which they delivered. As these seances proceeded, it became evident that some human agency intervened. We prefer to feel that Edward Kelly was responsible for the progressive deterioration of the revelations. It was not Dr. Dee, for during the seances he sat quietly in prayer, asking the love and protection of God and beseeching heaven that only good and true messages would come to him. Kelly was a man of ambition, however, and his mind was divided between crystal gazing and alchemy. Ultimately, Dee and Kelly separated, the latter coming to a tragic end. Kelly died in prison, possibly a suicide. Even after he was convinced that Kelly was not an honorable man, old Dr. Dee remembered with kindness and forgiveness the years of their association, and retained a continuing faith in the spiritual phenomena recorded in his book. The closing years of Dee's life were eventful only in terms of poverty. Dee finally obtained the wardenship of Christ's College, Manchester, but this was a forlorn institution from which he received slight remuneration. Occasionally the Queen was helpful, and also on occasion there were horoscopes that paid a pittance. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, King James exhibited certain respect for the aged counsellor. There is an account that Dee had foreseen in his crystal glass the details of the gunpowder plot. Even though the king was opposed to most magical arts, he did not disturb the old man of Mortlake. Shortly before his death, Dee revived his interest in psychic phenomena and appeared to have enlarged his own gifts in this direction. Death reached him in the shadowed walls of Mortlake near the end of 1608. Several writers have attempted to measure the stature of Dr. Dee. He has reputation as an alchemist, was even associated with the Rosicrucian order, and was certainly a scholar of ability. There is probably much more to him than history has preserved, for he was a pioneer in many fields. It is indeed a pity that his financial limitations prevented him from publishing many of his learned works. and that an atmosphere of mystery has divided his memory from the factual world of the 20th century. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.